Assalamu alaikum. My name is Luke Duggleby and I'm a British photographer. I work for magazines, NGOs and books around the world. After that, my good friends here in Mahachkala took me around Dagestan to show me the incredible mountains, the scenery. We stayed at people's houses, we ate traditional food. And it was a very, very special experience. During my time here, I visited villages that for centuries have made silver artifacts, silver objects. I've been taken up into the mountains to visit beautiful ancient medieval villages that sit on the edge of mountain slopes.
Maybe I plug in the microphone
the
and
architecture, the houses are fascinating.
Pixel, we're doing a deep dive into Khabib and Dagestan. You just jumped into the history of Dagestan. The link for this video is in the description down below. So, everyone wants to know more about Khabib. I'm definitely one of them. This man went there on holiday, had a drone, he's a photographer. Got some excellent shots out here. Man, this is like an ancient place.
Traditions,
Thousands
which is
years
absolutely
old.
fascinating. Not many tourists come to Dagestan, but you should. It is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. The people are so friendly. I've been completely
Looks like
humbled
ruins
by their
right there.
hospitality. They're generous, welcoming, and my only regret here has been that it hasn't been long enough. Today I leave, but hopefully either at the end of this year or next year I will return and visit some other places.
J4's gonna hide in the bathroom and watch with us. Fantastic. This is all Dagestan that you're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the drone views going. The land of the mountains. Steve Johnson's taking his pants off. He's excited. Looks like a favela in Brazil. You know what? I thought the same thing, Pulse. I said, holy smokes. Some ancient land over here. Give our man a follow. Link for the video is in the description down below. Alright, so that was video number 1. Let's get ready for the next one. And this one is going to be a deep dive into the culture of the area. And what I mean by that is we're going to figure out how this land that was once ran by the Russians, it might have been Orthodox at one time, changed to becoming majority Islam. And this is the Caucasus is what they call it. Oh wait, first let's do the mixed mollywoppy Khabib's Rise of a Savage video. Mixed mollywoppery, if you're not following this guy, his videos are freaking amazing. You gotta tune in for this shit. So let's jump into his video.
While most 10-year-olds had their lazy asses plonked in front of a TV set playing World of Witchcraft or whatever, somewhere in the impoverished hills of Dagestan, a 10-year-old Khabib was out entertaining his comrades by rolling around in the dirt, grappling with a fucking bear. This video is just the type of meanwhile in Russia shit that can begin to explain why Russian fighters are typically tough as fuck and can at times have an almost haunting indifference to the prospect of gratuitous violence and just general savagery at the highest levels. But wrestling a bear sounds more brutal than it actually was. The reality is, the bear looks all cute and cuddly, and Khabib is just playing around. To get to the root of what really makes Khabib hard as nails, there are political, economic, cultural, and geographic considerations. A good starting point, though, is the Spartan training camp in which Khabib was basically raised. While developing his skills in the disciplines of wrestling, judo, and combat sambo, Khabib lived with 15 other boys, training twice a day in an unforgiving military-style training regimen overseen by his father, Abdulmanap. Now, whenever we hear of a fighter getting trained by his father, it immediately begs the questions, who is this guy and what are his credentials? Abdulmanap began training wrestling at the age of 8 as a powerful tool for self-defense and to instill discipline. At the age of 19, he joined the army. In 1981, I joined the Russian army and participated in all sorts of sports competitions during my time there. It was a school of discipline. He then went on to study judo in one of Ukraine's top universities and fought his way onto the Ukrainian judo team. Over the next couple of years, he began collecting trophies, winning national championships in 3 separate disciplines: judo, sambo, and freestyle wrestling. So obviously in his own right, Abdulmanap was not a man to be fucked with. And by combining his vast experience of high-level combat sports with the rigid structure of military life, he was the perfect man to mold young minds into a bunch of murderous fucking war machines. At the heart of Abdulmanap's training philosophy is the harsh principle of discipline or punishment. In a Russian documentary, Khabib stated, "There were a lot of punishments. I said to the father that I didn't want to study, he punished. When he explained to me with words, I didn't understand. With the fists, I understood immediately." So by punishment, we're not talking about taking away Khabib's Game Boy. It was more of a step out of line and get the fuck smashed out of you by a grown-ass man style discipline. This type of corporal punishment and military lifestyle may seem extreme or even barbaric in the West. But in Dagestan at the time, most young men were facing 2 options: a career in sports or militant Islam. So if you go to career guidance in Dagestan, you might be getting a fucking death sentence. In the Western world, we have the privilege of peaceful parenting, but there's no doubt in my mind that Abdulmanap was coming from a good place. He was doing everything in his power to equip his sons and students with everything they needed to deal with the harsh realities of the Caucasus. Having said that, even though that type of parenting is totally unnecessary in the West, when you look at some of the pathetic bullshit on college campuses these days, you almost wish you could stick some of these assholes in a container and ship them off to Dagestan to spend a semester or 2 with Abdulmanap. If they started yapping about campus safe spaces, then doctors would have to surgically remove Abdulmanap's boot from their ass like they're delivering a fucking baby. And the proof is in the pudding. Abdulmanap is regarded as the father of MMA in Dagestan. He's produced 20 Combat World Sambo champions, and at least 4 of his students have made it to the UFC. There are certain athletes whose story it's impossible to untangle from their mentor. Mike Tyson and Cus D'Amato, for example. A big part of Tyson's success came from his reverence for the wisdom of his teacher and the humble acceptance that even in the face of enormous success, he was still the student. Well, Khabib very much has this reverence for Abdulmanap. It's shameful to offend a father or an elder. If you're punished, it means you deserved it. And it must be incredibly powerful when the man guiding your career and teaching you everything you know is also your primary motivation. After an emotional win over Abel Trujillo, Khabib stated, "My main motivation is my father. He invested a lot of time into me. He brought me up and made a man out of me. And his happy face after the fight is the best reward for me. I cannot let him down." Khabib has stated that his father always created the toughest conditions with the stated goal of either mentally breaking Khabib or driving him to reach that next level, constantly striving to improve. Now, say what you want about the methods, but that type of relentless striving is how you create one tough motherfucker with an unbreakable spirit and a work ethic that shits all over your regular, average, world-class fighter. To summarize that whole point, Khabib was simply bred to be a savage. It's not what he does, it's who he is. When Khabib was discussing the time he spent injured, he said the following: "It was like someone takes you and puts you in jail, like you were isolated." In other words, martial arts and violence is how Khabib relates to the world. Without it, he feels completely cut off from humanity. Every nation is a fighting nation, if you go back far enough. But in Dagestan, there's still blood on the soil. There's a brilliant article on Bloody Elbow describing the history of the region. Dagestan and the Caucasus were conquered by the Soviet Union in the 1800s in a brutal takeover that lasted almost 50 years. Since then, the region has played host to a series of attempts to establish an independent Islamic state, often centered in Dagestan. The most recent of these was in 1999, when there was a brief conflict between warring Islamic factions vying for control of the region. The whole affair lasted only 6 weeks before Russian airstrikes bombed the fuck out of their asses and brought an emphatic end to the conflict. Abdulmanap believes the conflict had an impact on his children. The simmering tensions and constant threat of danger in the region placed training in a very different context, namely as preparation for the potential onset of war. I believe every man must be ready for war, even in peaceful times. It is always a topic of discussion in the Caucasus. We often hear fighters say, "I'll fight anywhere. I'll fight in the street." But when Khabib says it in that calm, ice-cold, matter-of-fact monotone, you believe him. I'm sure for most fighters, the UFC is about the highest stakes they can imagine. But from the time Khabib was a child, grappling with a bear, his subconscious has likely been grappling with the prospect of a fight with far greater consequences, where it's not a matter of win bonuses and title shots, it's a matter of life and fucking death. The usual pressure and nerves associated with a fistfight must have muted significance for someone whose whole psychology has adapted to living in an area of boiling hostility between radical Islamic fundamentalists. Good luck getting in Khabib's head. The guy is ice cold. He states his intentions without any theatrics or emotion, like he's simply stating a fact. Water is wet, the sky is blue, I'm gonna fucking smash you. Can you imagine the build-up for McGregor versus Khabib? A lot was made of the confrontation heading into 205, but for me, a better summary of the two personalities were their post-fight interviews. Both were fucking glorious. Conor was his usual brash, charismatic self. Where the fuck is my other belt? $4 billion? Cheap motherfuckers. Khabib, on the other hand, was cool, concise, and supremely confident in the face of a hostile crowd. Beginning of year, he tap like chicken. End of year, he fight for title. There's only 6 million Irish. There's 150 million Russians. On the MMA Hour, John Kavanagh later replied, "It may be 150 million versus 6 million, but when that cage door closes, it's one-on-one." Perfect. No disrespect to Ferguson, but when you consider everything, the styles, a surgical striker versus a relentless grappler, the psychological warfare, a mouth that can decimate opponents versus an unbreakable will, the personalities, confident and overstated versus equally confident but understated. Khabib versus McGregor is my most anticipated fight for 2017. It is a glorious clash of two polar opposite titans of the sport, right in their fucking prime.
Yes.
Does not get any better. If you developed the photo negative of McGregor, you'd have a picture of Nurmagomedov, probably holding a fucking knife. The last thing I want to briefly touch on is the geography, religion, and culture of the region. In the documentary, Khabib stated, "We have grown up in such severe conditions, in mountains. Therefore, it is evident in our spirit. Compare 15 minutes in the cage to life in the mountains. It is incomparable." Wow. Abdulmanap has stated, "In my opinion, training deep in the mountains is an irreplaceable part of training. You simply cannot go 3 or 5 full rounds without elevation training." With regards to religion, Khabib is a devout Muslim, which, as we know, does not tolerate vices like drink or drugs. If you went out of your way to orchestrate the perfect circumstances to produce a physical and mental monster, you'd have a hard time doing better than the cold, cruel mountains of Dagestan. And that is the monster who arrived on American shores. By the time Khabib made it to the UFC, he had spent almost his entire life training at altitude, under Spartan conditions, in a remote mountain town, with no serious distractions outside the terrifying prospect of civil war, while practicing a religion that simply does not permit vices. Khabib's not your average fighter, he is a fucking savage.
Holy shit. Mixed Molly Whoppery, you freaking outdid yourself there. Not really though. Excellent freaking video. No drugs, no drink, only tiramisu. Nicely done. I like it. I like it. And so, Khabib, dude, this is the Rocky story. This is going off into the mountains to train. This is what Conor should have been doing, working on his cardio. You know, he's out riding bikes and shit to try and get that done. What is that gonna do? And he's gonna train wrestling for a couple of months and get it up to Khabib's level? I don't think so, man. Alright, now, this video here is basically gonna tell us about how this region went from Orthodox Christian to Islamic. And we're gonna do a deep dive. I believe we're going to like the 18th century here or some shit. Let's launch it.
إن أردتم أن تكونوا شامة بين الورى فاختفوا إن أردتم أن تكونوا شامة بين الورى.
How powerful were the Russians at that time? Let me tell you how powerful they were. They had defeated the Persians, they had defeated the Turks, all the way up to China. They ruled. Nobody came in their way, all the way up to China. They had Serbia, they had Mongolia, they had Poland. Even the British were concerned because if they took the Caucasus, then they would be their neighbors in India. And then they were speaking about a crusade. The Russians were speaking about a crusade. They were saying that if we take the Caucasus, then we will be able to start a new crusade. We can liberate the holy lands, the Masjid al-Aqsa. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a man who I call the Salahuddin of the Caucasus. Imam Shamil rahimahullah, for the next quarter of a century, Imam Shamil did not allow this superpower to move. They did whatever they could, but they could not defeat Imam Shamil rahimahullah. Imam Shamil was born where? He was born in a village called Gimri in Dagestan in 1797. He belonged to a family of Avars. Avars are people who live in the Caucasus and who are very high, 9 generations of very high nasab and family. This was what his real lineage was. But the Russians didn't believe that.
He was known
The
as
Russians,
the
when they
prophet of
heard
the
about
kings,
Imam
says Steve
Shamil
Johnson.
and his great feats and how heroic this man was and how magnificent he was, they said, no, there's no way that this man can be a Muslim or of any other origins besides Christians. So what they said, that he was actually the son of a prince from Georgia, Christian prince, who had an ikhtilaf with his brother and who migrated to the Caucasus. And then from there he migrated to Persia. And this was his son. Meaning that Imam Shamil was too good to be a Muslim. He was too good to be a Muslim.
Russian
Imam
fake
Shamil
news.
rahimahullah, as a child, he would spend much of his time in the masjid. He would learn the Quran, the Sunnah. He was a man who did a lot of dhikr. He was actually a Sufi. He belonged to the Naqshbandiya Khalidiyya Tariqa. The Naqshbandiya Khalidiyya Tariqa, when it came into the Caucasus, there were many pagan habits in the Muslims, many bid'at. And it was the Naqshbandiya Khalidiyya Tariqa which actually expunged this. Physically, what was Imam Shamil like? Physically, Imam Shamil was actually a very weak young man. But academically, he was very good. And he was very pious to the degree that he would spend much of his time in the masjid. And his father actually used to drink. And this would eat up Imam Shamil rahimahullah. So one day, Imam Shamil took out his dagger and he said to his father, he said, Wallahi, I feel like killing myself when I see you drinking. And this had a deep impact on his father and he stopped drinking. Academically, Imam Shamil excelled. In the understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah, Imam Shamil excelled to the degree that his colleagues became jealous. And one day, they ambushed him and they beat him senseless. They even stabbed him. Now, amongst the people of the Caucasus, it was a sign of weakness that when you are beaten up, that you run to your parents.
Dude,
You don't do that.
I added it up. This is why
So what
Khabib
did he do?
stayed
He
in
crawled into
Las
the
Vegas
forest.
when he injured his
And
knee.
then he healed his wounds with herbs and he got better and then he came back. And
Khabib
this
stayed
was
in
the
America
changing
to
point in the
rehabilitate
life
his
of
knee.
Imam Shamil rahimahullah. After this he
remembers that?
became the warrior. They say no man could run like Imam Shamil. No man could ride a horse like Imam Shamil. No man could swim like Imam Shamil. No man could fight like
first
Imam
Ali.
Shamil. You know how they
Listen to
would train? They would put a bullet on their tongue or a pebble on their tongue and they would run for miles and miles. And if you panted and the bullet fell down, that meant that you were not fit enough today. You weren't fit enough yet. Imam
You can't
Shamil
go 5
rahimahullah, he could jump over a stream which was 27 feet. He could leap over the shoulder of a person. As far as strength, Imam Shamil was 6'3". They say that he could split the butt of a rifle with one strike. In one of the battles, one of the Cossack horsemen, Imam Shamil rahimahullah struck him with a sword from the head and he literally split him into two, right down to his butt. Right down to his butt. As while riding a horse, Imam Shamil rahimahullah, he would have a rifle in one hand, a sword in the other hand, and he would control the horse. The reins would be in his mouth. And this is how he would control the horse. He could come down from the horse, come down to the belly and come up from the other side. This is what these people were like. The London Times defined Imam Shamil as the greatest chieftain who ever lived. The Times 150 years ago wrote so many articles on Imam Shamil that the articles, the cuttings reached him in the mountains of the Caucasus.
Right there.
The mountains
Traditional
of the
headgear.
فاختفوا آثار جيل للمعالي سطرا جيل زيد وأسيد ومعاذ والبراء.
Man, that was just a great deep dive into the history out there. What's with the pop-off? These people don't drink or do drugs. Afros on Russians. He had the largest land empire of all time, says Steve Johnson. Wow. This looks like a cult. I don't know about all that. All right, now let's get this last one queued up here for part 1 of the deep dive into Khabib. There'll be more to come next Friday. We'll continue the deep dive into Khabib. Next up, it's going to be Anatomy of a Fighter. If you guys haven't been watching Anatomy of a Fighter, you are missing out. Holy shit. It's what you wish you could do. You could go travel to the gym, get a nice close introspective with the guys. That's what we're going to get here. There's many versions out here, but this is going to do it for part 1 of the deep dive into Khabib. Let's roll this shit.
No, I think George St. Pierre is the greatest athlete who ever competed in UFC. He's real champ inside the cage, outside the cage, and just interesting about competition. I want to compete with this guy. I respect him. I met him one time in Moscow. Couple days we stayed together, you know, and he's very good guy, very respectful guy, and
Powerful Harris
him,
Productions.
but
Will Harris Productions.
this is not about, oh, I didn't respect this guy, I don't like this guy, that's why I want to fight with him. No, this is about legacy. Everybody want a legacy. He is greatest athlete in UFC, greatest champion, and I want to fight with him. I want to take all legacy, you know. That's why.
Eagles MMA. Deep in the mountains. Smash, Khabib, smash, mofo.
Me versus Conor, it's more media, more money fight, you know, like pay-per-view sale. But me versus GSP is pay-per-view fight too, but like about me versus Conor, okay, I'm going to take him down and beat him end of the first round. What people gonna say? They're gonna say, okay, if they fight stand-up, Conor gonna beat him. Of course, everybody know Khabib's wrestling level is different than Conor. Okay, I fight versus George St. Pierre. What are they gonna say? They're gonna just wait. Okay, we don't know. Nobody knows.
Я хочу соперников.
Yes.
Конор, Тони Фергюсон, Джон Сент Пьер и чемпион 77. На этом, я думаю, достаточно доказать миру, что он боец экстра-класс.
Crazy.
Holy
Fasting
shit.
is not easy.
Can you guys
17
imagine that?
hours, no drink, no eat, nothing. It's like you cut it.
27, 20, 29, 30. He wants to go 30-0, take out all lightweights, and then take out the welterweight champ.
Hey.
Wow.
Sometimes I miss my young age, you know, when I was young. Same city, same friends, same place, nothing changed. Only one thing changed. I become UFC lightweight champion, and that's it.
Fucking Khabib, dude. If Khabib goes 30-0, takes out all those guys, he's gonna cement himself with the GOAT status. I don't know anyone will be able to reach.
Allahu Akbar.
What's up? My name is Georg. I'm friends this guy, best lightweight fighter in the world.
Not bad English, not bad. beast. Damn, I'm getting hungry just watching this.
Everybody friendly. Yeah, we everybody friendly. Never fight each other. With other mafia.
I was watching another one and he was talking about the Dagestani people. And he was surprised at even the tourists, they got treated great. You just think there's some stoic means not true.
Khabib, I control this everything here. You have to give me money. He said this. Small guy, very small guy. I tell him, what you control? Like about parking, like everything. And he's like 10 years old, his ears like smashed like crazy, you know? Like he looked like he training, he wrestling like last 20 years, you know? He said, please, you have to give me money because I control everything. Now you come here, you park your car, you have to pay me money. I go crazy with him, I laugh like crazy. I say, okay, how much I have to give? It's like $10, you know? I say, you're too expensive, you have to come down, like maybe $5, $6. Like $10 is too much for you. He say, hey, my mother is
$5 and some push-ups, okay, and you got it, bro.
It's crazy. Dagestan life, brother, Dagestan life.
Damn, that's the Dagestan life. You go into a city, these mofos, these young kids that have been wrestling for what an American would take 20 years or so, he's going to extort your ass, dude. He's going to tell you, pay up, bro. I control the parking. I control everything. So no wonder fucking Khabib wants a little bit of something for his money that he gives out. He sees the hard work, the harshness that these guys got in Dagestan. You're living the easy life here in America. You're probably getting some sort of assistance or some shit like that, man. Khabib ain't gonna give it to you easy, bro. They ain't got it easy. He's not gonna give it to you easy. Alright, guys, that would be it for the deep dive into Khabib for part 1. Tune in next week, Friday, 2:30 Pacific time, 5:30 Eastern for the deep dive into Khabib, part 2. And until next time, back to you, sickos. I'm out of here. Peace.